2. How S can be indirectly self-defeating. If we call some theory T, call the aims that it gives us our T given aims. Call T indirectly, individually self-defeating when it is true that if someone tries to achieve his T given aims, these aims will be, on the whole, worse achieved. On this definition, we do not simply ask whether a theory is self-defeating. We ask whether it is self-defeating when applied to certain people during certain periods. My S given aim is that my life go for me as well as possible. It can be true that if I try to do whatever will be best for me, this will be worse for me. There are two kinds of case. A, my attempts may often fail. I may often do what will be worse for me than something else that I could have done. B, even if I never do what of the acts that are possible for me will be worse for me, it may be worse for me if I am purely self-interested. It might be better for me if I had some other disposition. In cases of kind A, the bad effects come from what I do. Suppose that I steal whenever I believe that I will not be caught. I may be often caught and punished. Even in self-interested terms, honesty may therefore be the best policy for me. These cases are not worth discussing. If this is the way in which S is self-defeating, this is no objection to S. S is self-defeating here only because of my incompetence in attempting to follow S. This is a fault, not in S, but in me. We might object to some theory that it is too difficult to follow, but this is not true of S. The cases worth discussing are of kind B. In these cases, it will be worse for me if I am purely self-interested, even if I succeed in never doing what will be worse for me. The bad effects come not from what I do, but from my disposition, or the fact that I am purely self-interested. What does this fact involve? I could be purely self-interested without being purely selfish. Suppose that I love my family and friends. On all the theories about self-interest, my love for these people affects what is in my interests. Much of my happiness comes from knowing about and helping to cause the happiness of those I love. On the desire fulfillment theory, it will be better for me if, as I want, things go well for those I love. What will be best for me may, in these and other cases, largely overlap with what will be best for those I love. But in some cases, what will be better for me will be worse for those I love. I am self-interested if, in all these cases, I do what will be better for me. It may be thought that, if I am self-interested, I shall always be trying to do whatever will be best for me. But I often act in one of two ways, believing that neither would be better for me. In these cases, I am not trying to do what will be best for me. I am acting on a more particular desire. And this may be true even when I am doing what I know will be best for me. Suppose that I know that if I help you, this will be best for me. I may help you because I love you, not because I want to do what will be best for me. In describing what it would be for me to be self-interested, it is enough to claim that, while I often act on other desires, I never do what I believe will be worse for me. If this is true, it will be clearer to call me not self-interested, but never self-denying. I shall now redescribe the interesting way in which, for any individual, S may be indirectly self-defeating. This is true when, if someone is never self-denying, this will be worse for him than it would be if he had some other disposition. Even if someone succeeds in never doing what will be worse for him, it may be worse for him that he is never self-denying. It might be better for him if he had some other disposition. He might then sometimes do what will be worse for him. but the cost to him of acting in this way might be less than the benefits of having this other disposition. These claims can be true on all of the different theories about self-interest. Hedonists have long known that happiness, when aimed at, is harder to achieve. If my strongest desire is that I be happy, I may be less happy than I would be if I had other desires that were stronger. Thus, I might be happier if my strongest desire was that someone else be happy. Here is another example. Kate is a writer. Her strongest desire is that her books be as good as possible. Because she cares so much about the quality of her books, she finds her work rewarding. If her desire to write good books was much weaker, she would find her work boring. She knows this, and she accepts the hedonistic theory about self-interest. She therefore believes that it is better for her that her strongest desire is that her books be as good as possible. But because of the strength of this desire, she often works so hard and for so long that she collapses with exhaustion and is, for a period, very depressed. Suppose that Kate believes truly that if she worked less hard, her books would be slightly worse, but she would be happier. She would find her work just as rewarding, and she would avoid these severe depressions. Kate therefore believes that when she works so hard, she is doing what is worse for her. But how could it become true that she never acts in this way? It may be a fact that she would never act in this way only if she had a much weaker desire that her books be as good as possible. And this would be even worse for her, since she would then find her work boring. On the hedonistic theory, it would be worse for Kate if she was never self-denying. Suppose that we accept not the hedonistic, but the desire fulfillment theory about self-interest. We may then deny that, in this example, Kate is doing what is worst for her. Her strongest desire is that her books be as good as possible. By working so hard, though she makes herself exhausted and depressed, she makes her books slightly better. She is thereby causing her strongest desire to be better fulfilled. On our theory about self-interest, this may be better for her. If we are not hedonists, we need a different example. Suppose that I am driving at midnight through some desert. My car breaks down. You are a stranger and the only other driver near. I manage to stop you, and I offer you a great reward if you rescue me. I cannot reward you now, but I promise to do so when we reach my home. Suppose next that I am transparent, unable to deceive others. I cannot lie convincingly. Either a blush or my tone of voice always gives me away. Suppose finally that I know myself to be never self-denying. If you drive me to my home, it will be worse for me if I gave you the promised reward. Since I know that I never do what will be worse for me, I know that I shall break my promise. Given my inability to lie convincingly, you know this too. You do not believe my promise, and therefore leave me stranded in the desert. This happens to me because I am never self-denying. It would have been better for me if I had been trustworthy, disposed to keep my promises, even when doing so would be worse for me. You would then have rescued me. It may be objected that, even if I am never self-denying, I could decide to keep my promise, since making this decision would be better for me. If I decided to keep my promise, you would trust me and would rescue me. This objection can be answered. I know that, after you have driven me home, it would be worse for me if I gave you the promised reward. If I know that I am never self-denying, I know that I shall not keep my promise. And if I know this, I cannot decide to keep my promise. I cannot decide to do what I know that I shall not do. If I can decide to keep my promise, this must be because I believe that I shall not be never self-denying. We can add the assumption that I would not believe this unless it was true. It would then be true that it would be worse for me if I was, and would remain, never self-denying. It would be better for me if I was trustworthy. I have described 2 ways in which it would be worse for someone if he was never self-denying. There are many other ways in which this can be true. It is probably true of most people during most of their lives. When the self-interest theory is applied to these people, it is what I call indirectly, individually self-defeating. Does this make S fail in its own terms? Does S condemn itself? This depends on whether S tells these people to be never self-denying.